Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, building experiences that connect, remove friction, and deliver insights. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me today is Jamie Ryder. Jamie believes that copywriting is a lot like philosophy. It involves pondering a lot of head-scratching questions, pulling answers from obscure places, sharing stories that make an impact, and generally pushing yourself to be better. A Manchester-based copywriter whose philosophy is to help businesses share their philosophy with the world. Jamie was inspired to set up Stoic Athenaeum through his interest in Stoicism and other ancient schools of thought. He is on a mission to make philosophy sexy, or at least down to earth. Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, Jamie Ryder.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ed. It really is a pleasure to be here. And as you did mention, hopefully we can bring philosophy a bit more down to earth today in this chat.
Sounds good. Well, Jamie, first off, why do you do what you do?
Excellent question. This changes depending on the moods and the circumstances, but at my core, I really like the idea of what a philosophy is or a set of values are to people. And from having done copywriting for a number of years, there was always different ways that I looked at it. But through the pandemic, there was, of course, a lot of anxiety about a lot of things. And I realized that I needed to make a shift around a lot of things. And I'd never actually studied the topic of philosophy in school or anything like that. So it was quite a new discovery when I actually started to dig really into it, because I had this thing that I just needed to recalibrate myself around. And then Stoicism happened to be that thing. And then I realized that I think everybody has that belief system in them that they just want to share and they need to live by and stand by. And then that became the catalyst for pairing it with copywriting and seeing how every business needs to share their values and communicate what they stand for to their audience too.
And can you give me an example of how you have paired up this applied philosophy to business?
So there are a few ways that I like to look at this. I see it from a personal leadership standpoint and also to the marketing side, because I think any business leader or CEO or whatever you want to say, leading yourself is the first thing before you can lead anybody else. And certainly with the practices of Stoicism, I see that being such a game-changing belief system to apply to business, particularly with how practical some of the examples of the tools and techniques in the school are. One thing that comes to mind for me is called the view from above, which for me, when it's trying to diffuse things like anxiety or a lot of stress about uncertainty, that really helps to center me, because first, you can take a step outside of yourself and think, right, if there's people in my immediate vicinity who are probably going through the same thing that I am, then it puts me on their level. But then you want to take it a step further and think that if you're looking down at the entire world, then you can be a part of a wider thread of humanity, and then you're connected to something that's bigger than yourself. And then you can slowly come back down to yourself. And then hopefully you'll have diffused whatever that negative emotion might have been, and you can shift, reframe, or just shift to another task too. So it's that simplicity of doing those things over and over that I find really helpful about Stoic practices. But generally, I think if you've got some kind of guiding principles or purpose in your life, then that can certainly count as a philosophy too.
Well, let's just back up a bit, because I think that there's a lot of folks who have a misunderstanding of what Stoicism is. A lot of folks, we use that word, so-and-so is so stoic, and what we mean is they're like, Mr. Spock on Star Trek, that they have no emotions whatsoever. So first, I guess give us a quick basic definition of Stoicism.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I always like this question, because to me, that's what I needed to get right with to begin with. It's that little less stoicism where you are gritting your teeth or you're emotionless and you just carry on with things. And when I discovered big S stoicism, I realized it was the opposite, i.e. you do have to regulate your emotions appropriately, but you have to be active in your world as a leader or as a friend or a son or whatever that role is. And you can try to uplift your communities at the same time. And what I do like about the simplicity of it is it's just about controlling what you can control and just pushing aside the things that you can't control with these four principles of justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage. And the founder of Stoicism, Zeno Citium, really gave a succinct definition of that, which is to live in accordance with nature. And there's a few ways that I look at that, i.e., you can live in accordance with your own nature, with other people's natures. You don't necessarily have to always get on with them, but you can at least try to appropriate what you're doing to that situation and just move on as you need to. But also the wider world of nature, sustainability, and your communities too. So I think it is such a holistic way to look at the world, and you can evolve it as time goes on, because the 2000-year version is much different today than it was previously, but there are still those timeless core principles that are still underpinning it.
And apply that specifically to then copywriting in a way, like where you've worked with say a customer of yours who's come in and said, I want you to write some copy around X. How does that manifest itself then?
Yeah, so the way I look at it with that idea of values, that's really important to me, because I've wrestled with this a lot in myself, because values might seem like quite a broad category, really. And the idea that I've come to is that it's okay to start with buzzwords, i.e., you might say you want to be authentic, sustainable, educational, but then it's about digging deeper to see like how you've applied those principles in your personal life and your business life. And this forms the core of a workshop that I do called Brand Circles of Care, where it is getting to that core foundational values. And the example here is that mental health is a big sector for me. And I've been working with a brand recently who wants to rebrand their mental health positioning and how they want to show up in a very complex industry. So by running this workshop, some of the beliefs that were identified were things like curiosity or compassion. So it's looking at that in a deeper mindset, and then out of the workshop that can form part of a website or articles or some thought leadership content that might be helpful to start building that wider philosophy of that business.
And Jamie, we have an exit question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, who is a hero of yours and why are they a hero?
So many heroes, but I'm going to give you a very different example here, because to me, this is part of something that I think about a lot. It's that we can all be more than one thing. Just because you started doing something doesn't mean that you are just defined by that one thing. And as a kid, I always really liked professional wrestling. And the guy who comes to mind is Chris Jericho, who started off as a wrestler, but he became a musician, a podcast host, like a lot of different things. And just by looking at him purely as a leader or as a business owner, his evolution has been incredible. And I'm just really inspired by these people who have longevity, but they've been able to reinvent themselves over and over.
And lastly, Jamie, how can somebody contact you?
You can find me through stoicathenaeum.com, where you can sign up to my newsletter called Sexy Philosophy, because philosophy will always be sexy in my mind. And you can always find me on LinkedIn as well with Jamie Ryder.
All right. And we also have an offer for a free 15-minute copywriting consultation that's we're putting in the show notes. Jamie Ryder with Stoic Athenaeum, thanks so much for being a guest on the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Ed.
Review and subscribe by searching your podcast player of choice for Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.